Good to see you again on our channel. The quiet counterpoint to the boisterous business world has been Emmylou Harris for decades. Selfless, spiritual, and able to bounce back from challenges. Grace, however, is not limitless. And this is the moment when Emmylou is finally speaking out now that she has nothing to prove and no desire to please. She is pointing fingers, and there were 5 of them. Behind the scenes, 5 artists stepped beyond her personal boundary. By her own hubris, treachery, and complete indifference to the ideals embodied in the music she has performed her whole life, rather than any scandal. I am not angry. A woman who has been silent for too long is finally speaking out. Betrayed feelings aren't exclusive to the younger age, though. When it comes from people you once held in high esteem, it can sting more. As an example, consider Van Morrison. During their early 2000s combined tour, there was an aura of reverence. On stage, it seemed as if 2 superstars were a dancing pair, creating a sonic tapestry that the audience would describe as enchanted. Emmylou discovered the hard way that not all magical effects may be worn in public. When Morrison was off stage, she was cold and abrupt. The room was not only cooled, but it was chilled by his mere presence. Through his avoidance of eye contact and his dismissal of her voice as too sugary for genuine blues, he subtly diminished her. Dismissive without any hint of humor or criticism. He ignored the one thing her admirers loved most about her, as if it were a piece of sugar on the floor. Staying silent was more Emmylou's style than anything else. However, she wilted on the inside. No one witnessed the last strike. That was a private affair. When Morrison's solo got too loud in the mix, she became angry and yelled at a young sound technician. It went beyond being impolite. That was command. Cautionary note. Emmylou gathered her belongings that evening. For reasons of duty, she completed the tour, but thereafter, they maintained complete silence. Not in the wings. Not long after that. In all possible futures. What lingered with her was not wrath. There was a sense of letdown. Another tale might have been her chance for kinship, she had hoped. To her surprise, she discovered a frigid stone. Then, as if that weren't cold enough, she discovered an even chillier stillness just around the bend. Yeah, it would be Neil Young. With only one song to perform in a room so rich with history, their collaboration was meant to be personal. Having jotted down some chord progressions on a battered notepad, Emmylou showed up prepared. Her voice was gentle and steady, as if she were hoping for a creative collaboration. However, Neil paid no attention either. "Just give me a chance to do my thing," he muttered under his breath. The words themselves weren't cutting, but the icy tone made them hurt more. Consequently, she took a step back, silently recorded her part, and then departed. Basically, Juan, Daniel, and I were tasked with coming up with content. He was making suggestions. Evidently, I'm merely in the. A few weeks down the road, she found out he had substituted her voice for one that sounded just like hers. It felt as precise as a shadow. Nothing happened, nobody spoke up, and nobody explained anything. The deed itself was not the most painful part. It was as if she had never existed. Her presence had been erased. A life built on harmony crumbled under the weight of the subtle rejection. When betrayal occurs, it doesn't necessarily result in an explosion. From time to time, it subsides into a muted stillness, like a haze. The lack of response from Emmylou was a sign of trust being broken. On a path she believed they traversed in unison, another illusion shattered. Lucinda Williams's heartbreak was that. They ought to have been on the same team. A pair of determined women. The 2 of them managed to stay alive in a field that would not tolerate weakness unless it was submissive or broken. Lucinda had an edge that Emmylou admired. Her art, her rebellion, her insistence on not being boxed in. Lucinda wasn't an adversary, but rather a mirror image of herself. Natural grace, weathered but untainted. So, Emmylou anticipated at least some level of respect, if not outright enthusiasm, when she proposed a duet for a benefit album, something simple and unadorned, with voices harmonizing in harmony for a meaningful cause. Opposite that, Lucinda chuckled. "Angel stuff isn't my thing. The expression was careless and humorous, but the wounds were profound. It was more than simply a song rejection to Emmylou. It was like ignoring her whole person, her integrity, her passion, her music. Bridges were important to Emmylou. Lucy ignited the matches. Lucinda retreated from the spot where Emmylou extended her hand. Plus, that separation wasn't creative. On a personal level, that not all industry women desired togetherness was a sobering reminder to Emmylou. A few of them desired to make lines. She refrained from responding verbally or in writing, but the memory remained. The pain doesn't bleed when a lady you adore reduces you to a stereotype. It stings, and it alters who you are. Finally, the one name she had dreaded having to mention came up. An enduring symbol of closeness, shared principles, and unassuming power. The name has changed hands. At this point, though, the name offered no solace. It was chilly, a subtle pain in the space where peace once flourished. Nelson, Willie. Over tour bus coffee, they shared stages, tales, songs, laughs, and lengthy, deep silences that spoke more than words could. For Emmylou, Willie was more than simply a potential partner. She perceived a sympathetic criminal, a man whose values aligned with her own, and whose heart belonged to the truth rather than the latest fad. She thought they were in sync. Whispers of gospel harmonies and protest songs about Vietnam floated through the southern night sky. Something sacred seemed to underpin their bond. I thought he'd be on board with Emmylou's battle against the corporate-backed deal that exploited veterans' tribute concerts for profit by selling ad slots featuring their worn memories. A public declaration was not something she requested. A song was not what she desired. Silence, absence, and shared conviction were all she wished for. He did a performance instead. She contacted us via phone. He remained silent. Her writing was meticulous. He remained silent. Just a description. There is no euphemism. Gone was the guy whose voice, like weathered oak, had once encircled hers. Then it vanished. And that lack of sound? Quietness was lacking. There was a roar from it. It reverberated in her, penetrating beyond her recollections and melodies to a more profound level. The topic at hand was not music. It was a story of trust, of thinking another person shared your perspective on the world, and then, in the most painful way possible, of discovering that maybe they never did. It rattled her. Because treachery isn't necessarily obvious. Sometimes it's just not there when you need them, like a no-show. Because Emmylou devoted her life to creating meaningful music, Willie's quiet was anything but neutral for her. It was the kind of sound that would keep you awake at night. She couldn't sing her way out of that pain. She could only carry it with her. And then there was the one who had been a hope, a beacon of hope, a potential disaster that she had attempted to steer. Ryan Adams was that acquaintance. A tribute concert was where they first crossed paths. Ryan a whirlwind of anxious energy and guitar feedback, but Emmylou remained serene and unfaltering. He exhibited a youthful impulsiveness and a fiery, self-consuming brilliance. Despite the mayhem, Emmylou could make out a spirit and potential buried beneath the surface. She continued to display her disturbed intellect in her usual manner. Grace was extended by her. She made an effort to guide him, providing him with gentle wisdom when others offered him spotlights and freedom. Honesty, she said, is more important than shock value when reading lyrics. However, Ryan was not interested in sound advice. He desired adoration. Even when she politely declined to record with him due to her concerns that his lyrics sounded artificial and forced, he never once asked her why. He struck back, not in an aggressive manner, but by making fun of them. He criticized her work in interviews, saying it was irrelevant, too mushy, and heavenly. The final nail in the coffin was a song lyric that was obviously directed at her. It was obviously intimate, cynical, and spiteful. Her inner circle was fully aware. Attempting to love a storm left Emmylou, who had always thought music was a way to connect with others, looking at the price. She remained silent. None of it made it into the headlines, the songs, or even the whispers. Yet the burden was on her shoulders. For it's one thing to take a beating at the hands of a legendary figure. It's quite another to sustain injuries at the hands of someone you sought to support. At that point, she decided she had had enough, not of music per se, but of the idea that authenticity spreads like wildfire and the belief that a younger generation would be more responsible with the torch you lay. Instead, she realized that some people's hearts can't handle anything but their own passion. Not all wounds heal. Some just show you how to be gentler the next time. When no one else would continue Graham Parsons's music, Emmylou Harris stepped up. Even now, her voice has the power to crush your heart quietly, and she remains the heavenly harmony on 100 recordings. But suddenly, there's another quality to that voice. Discover the answer. Because what you have here is more than a roster of names. A reckoning has come. Years of holding their ground were finally broken by a storm. These weren't only slights in a business context. They were rifts in the soul. Events that altered her perception of individuals she had previously loved, trusted, or appreciated. She endured their attempts at shrinking her, some with quiet and others with disdain, for quite some time. Dignity, she realized, might entail both sticking it out and walking away. That's not bitterness. It's just her. She is precise. It's not anger. It appears that she is fully alert. This is not an adversary's list. Here are some painful experiences. They were all memorable, some louder than others. Even Emmylou, who once elevated country music to a sacred level, has moved on from performing hymns for listeners who failed to appreciate their significance. With elegance, she is shutting the doors. Rest certain, they are permanently closing their doors.